Hello and welcome to Scream Scene, the horror movie podcast where we watch every horror movie ever made in chronological order and then we rank them from best to worst. My name's Sarah.
And I'm Ben.
Thanks so much for listening to us today. We sound very fancy.
Well, hopefully. Hopefully you can hear the difference, listener.
At the very least, they will be able to hear that we are both centered and not one person is on the left side and one person's on the right side.
They're no longer stuck in the middle with us.
Yep.
So we bought some new podcast equipment.
Yes, I teased it a little bit on our Twitter. That's what the image of Samson from the story of Samson and Delilah and the Mazda Zoom Zoom car was.
Because I get
we
it
have
now.
two Samson Q2U microphones and a Zoom PodTrack P4 recorder.
Yeah, so Sarah had a bit of a nice bonus from her work, and after putting some of it in savings and putting some of it towards paying down the credit card, we had still a decent amount of money. So Sarah decided to treat us to new microphones and a new recorder. And so hopefully we sound nice and smooth.
Like smooth jazz.
Right.
So I'm very excited about this. It does mean that we're going to have to think up a new tier for our Patreon, because right now our first goal is $150, and then we'll do, horror adjacent episodes. But then right after that is new podcast equipment.
Right. I feel like now we need to have a tier for our backers on the Patreon where you get a tote bag.
A tote bag?
Because now I feel like I'm on public radio.
You're definitely talking like it. You're not... It's not that you're not sounding like yourself. You're just sounding like a very smooth version. Now that you have a microphone in front of you, you've just gone into character.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. It's a very different feel to recording the show.
Yeah, you sound a little low energy too.
I might be tired. Listen, get off my back.
Well, why don't you tell us what we are watching today?
So today, Sarah, we are watching The She Creature from 1956, directed by Edward L Cahn.
Cahn, really?
Yeah, with a C.
Oh, okay. Insert Star Trek reference here.
Sure, if you must. This is what was the bottom half of the double feature with It Conquered the World, which we watched last week. Mm-hmm. So this is another low-budget AIP Paul Blaisdell monster movie.
We should have waited for the new equipment so we weren't coming in the middle of a double feature. Because now if someone tries to listen to last week's episode and this one, it'll be disjointed for them.
Listen, that was going to happen regardless. The story of the production of The She Creature starts in a bit of a strange place, Sarah.
Go on.
So in 1952, in Colorado, a hypnotist named Maury Bernstein, an amateur hypnotist, put a housewife named Virginia Tighe into a trance and had her, tell me about your childhood. Tell me about, bring out those memories and whatnot. And he had her keep going back and back until she started talking about a very detailed account of her past life as an Irish woman named Bridie Murphy, who lived from 1806 to 1864. She recited, where she was born and the church that she was baptized in and who her husband was and where he worked and where they moved to and how she died and all of these things. And then how she was reborn 59 years later in America and all these things.
Is there historical record of this person existing?
So the story of Bridie Murphy became very well known in America due to a series of newspaper articles in the Denver Post in 1954. And this was followed by Bernstein writing a book called The Search for Bridie Murphy in 1956.
Okay.
The book became a bestseller, smash hit. There were novelty songs. People threw reincarnation, come as you were parties. And various like past life reincarnation stories began proliferating into pop culture. So after the book was published, researchers started looking into
this person.
Could they find any record of Bridie Murphy?
Yeah.
Right? They could find no record of Bridie Murphy, no record of her husband, the university he worked at, the church she went to, like nothing. Yes, there was a university at Belfast, but it wasn't built till after she died, or like in the story she died. Same with like there was that church, but it didn't exist until like the early 1900s. There was no record of the people. She also said, so her husband's name was Sean Murphy in this story, and she pronounced it Sean Murphy.
Like an American not knowing Sean is pronounced Sean.
Right, exactly.
So she read about this and then either through her own volition or just under hypnosis, her brain coming across this story and putting things together.
Yeah, so the conclusion of most researchers is that she experienced something called cryptomnesia, which is when your brain decides that like a thing that you've come across is like one of your own memories.
Okay.
So this is like where, you know, when you were 16, you like saw an episode of TV late one night, and then like 15 years later, 20 years later, you're like recounting it to people as like a thing that happened to you because like you were really tired and it was late at night, and the way your brain filed off the memories of that TV show like got weirded out, you know, and now you think it's a thing that happened to you. Or it's like when people like write a book or something and people are like, you ripped that idea off from somewhere, and they're like, I've never seen that other thing, and it's like, yeah, you did, you just forgot that you saw it. That's cryptomnesia. So what they found out was that Virginia was adopted at the age of 3, and her birth parents were part Irish, and she grew up with her birth parents in like an Irish immigrant neighborhood, and across the street from her was an Irish immigrant named Bridie Murphy Corkle, and Virginia was given up for adoption. Most people now believe that like her past life was basically built out of like memories from her early childhood of like her parents and of like this Irish woman who lived across the street, and just like got jumbled up in her head, as you say, under hypnosis.
Okay.
So regardless, as I mentioned, the book was a big hit, and there was like a big little like mini trend for reincarnation in the 50s. The film rights to the book were sold even before the book came out.
Sure, it's a great premise.
Well, and also that's one of those things where it's like, hello, I'm amateur hypnotist Maury Bernstein. And this housewife told me she was an Irish woman from the 19th century. So
money, please.
Yes, exactly. Give me a book deal, and then once I have a book deal, I'll sell the film rights before I've even finished writing the book. So the movie came out in 1956, later the same year that the book came out.
That's great timing.
Let's hit it while the iron's hot, you know? It was called The Search for Bridie Murphy. It was from Paramount. It starred Teresa Wright, who you would know best from The Best Years of Our Lives and Shadow of a Doubt.
Oh, is she like the little girl Charlie in Shadow of a Doubt?
Yeah, she's Charlie in Shadow of the Doubt, and then she's I forget the character's name, but no, she's the character who ends up with the amputee.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Or do I? Is it just cryptomnesia? It was me.
You were married to a amputee in 1946. There were
it was my uncle who was murdering old ladies.
So there were also knockoffs that
of course
also came out the same year in 1956, like I've Lived Before, which came out from Universal that year. So, you know, the folks over at American International Pictures, AIP, you know, Nicholson and Arkoff, they smelt a trend, And so Lou Rusoff was hired to write a script.
Now, is this before or after the hospitalization of his brother, which we covered in last week's episode?
So this would have been around the same time.
Okay.
Since this is the bottom half of that same double feature. However, AIP was not up for financing the movie entirely themselves. And so they brought on Ed Wood's one-time roommate Alex Gordon to produce the film if Gordon could provide 40% of the budget.
Whoa.
So it was like, hey, you want to be a movie producer?
Gotta fork up some cash.
Yeah. So Alex Gordon's brother, Richard Gordon, had a colleague who knew a financier named Jack Dippold, who then put up $40,000 of the movie's budget, which ended up being $104,000. So director Edward L Cahn was brought on to helm the picture. He was 57 years old, and his big claim to fame as a director was that he directed the Our Gang comedies from 1939 to 1943.
That's the Little Rascals knockoff.
No, that is the Little Rascals.
Oh, what am I thinking of? What's the knockoff?
Bowery Boys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Once those ended, Cahn had basically fallen into like B movies after that. He had helmed the film Creature with the Atom Brain for Columbia, which was written and produced by Kurt Siodmak the year earlier in 1955. So because Cahn had like a long standing career in Hollywood going back to like 1917, he had some connections. So he pulled some strings and convinced his friend Edward Arnold, who was a very experienced, well-known character actor, to come play the hypnotist for $3,000 for 1 week's work.
Wow.
And based on Edward Arnold coming in, Peter Lorre also then signed on to co-star.
Oh shit, we got Peter Lorre?
And then Arnold died 2 days before shooting was supposed to begin, and this prompted Peter Lorre to read the script. And then that resulted in Peter Lorre dropping out of the movie and firing his agent.
Oh, yeah. Oh boy. Oh no. Oh no.
So Alex Gordon tried to get John Carradine to take either of the two roles that had been left open, and Carradine turned it down.
Ooh, he doesn't turn anything down. He's like William Shatner.
No, John Carradine turned this movie down.
Oh no.
So ultimately, the role of the hypnotist went to Chester Morris, an experienced 55-year-old actor who had begun on Broadway in 1916 and made his film debut in 1929. He is best known for the 14 Boston Blackie films he made with Columbia in the 1940s, where he starred as criminal-turned-detective Boston Blackie. It's not like the blackface role or anything.
Okay.
He's just like a gang. It's just like meant to sound like a gangster name. Like Scarface or like...
Blackie, Scarface.
Babyface Nelson.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
After that series ended in 1949, Morris went back to the theater and also transitioned to television. So this was like a rare return to film for him. Peter Lorre's role, meanwhile, was ultimately taken by Tom Conway.
Oh, we have seen him before.
Yes, we last saw him in Bride of the Gorilla in 1951, and we've seen him in several pictures before that. Now, since then, Conway had gotten the lead role on the ABC television series Inspector Mark Saber, Homicide Detective. That show ran from 1951 to 1954, and then the role was recast with actor Donald Gray when the series underwent a reboot of concept and became Saber of London on ABC from 1955 to 1957, and then on NBC from 1957 to 1959.
So is it still about a detective?
Yes.
Okay.
In the original premise, Mark Saber was a British detective operating in an American city solving crimes.
And with like a fish out of water situation.
Right. In the Donald Gray version, Saber is a British detective in London solving international crimes, and also he has only one arm. Because Donald Gray only had one arm.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I just love and also.
Right. So Conway returned to B movies after that. And that's where we find him here at the age of 52. The movie also features Kathy Downs, the 30-year-old former cover model and one-time star who we last saw as the lead female role in The Phantom from 10,000 Leagues. As you may remember from that episode, she was like a teen cover model who got like picked up for a movie contract and like wasn't really expected to be anything other than a pretty face. And then
she was good, actually.
Yeah, and she was cast as the lead in My Darling Clementine as Clementine, and then something happened and Fox let her go from her contract suddenly without explanation, and she ended up doing a lot of B movies. This is, I think, the last time we're going to see her, but she did make a few more low-budget sci-fi films before retiring from acting at age 40, and then after that she remained unemployed until her death from cancer 10 years later in 1976. And this was the woman who, when she died, she had like no money at all. And then like her ex-husband, who was a fellow actor, like found out that she had no money and was like in hospital, and he like raised a bunch of money for her once he like found out that's what had happened to her, because they'd like fallen out of touch. And then when he showed up with the money, she was already dead.
Yeah, it was a very heartbreaking story.
Yes. So yeah, so she's in this one as well. Another supporting actor in the cast is Lance Fuller, a Universal International actor who had appeared as Brack in This Island Earth. So remember, in This Island Earth, there's the main alien scientist with the big brain.
Yeah.
Brack is like his assistant.
Oh, yeah.
Who doesn't like the humans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another actor who appears in a supporting role in this film is Australian actor Ron Randall, who had been a big star for Columbia in the 1940s. But when his career declined, he decided to switch to theater in the 1950s rather than go to B movies. And then he got frustrated with typecasting, so he moved to Britain because he was always getting typecast in American theater as like the Englishman, who is like the rival to the American romantic lead and ultimately doesn't get the girl.
Sure.
So he went to Britain figuring that like, you know, Englishmen might be allowed to get the girl there. And then his career declined there, so he moved back to Australia, where he came from. And then he returned to the U.S. To do this B movie. And
like specifically to do this movie? Or he came back then happened to get this movie?
He came back to the U.S. when he decided that he would take B movie roles after all. And this was the movie that was his first film back in the U.S. Following this, he appeared in a variety of small roles on TV, film, and theater for the rest of his career. He never became like a star again.
Yeah, but he still got steady work, which is pretty good.
Portraying the woman being hypnotized in the film is Marla English, who was 21 years old at the time. She was born in San Diego. She became a model in her teens and then was signed to a contract at Paramount at age 17. Her big breakthrough role came when she was 19 years old, when she appeared in the film noir Shield for Murder. And then the next year, she was cast opposite Spencer Tracy in The Mountain, which was a mountaineering movie scheduled to be filmed in the French Alps. English had fallen in love with fellow Paramount actor Larry Pennell, and she wanted the studio to cast Larry in the movie so that they could go to France together.
But it's with Spencer Tracy.
Yeah, just like if he got cast in like a minor role or something.
Okay.
You know, just so he would have an excuse to come to the Alps so that they could be together.
Yeah. Free
Paramount,
vacation.
Right. Paramount was like, no, we're not doing that. We're not just casting your boyfriend in the role for you, random 20-year-old actress. And she was like, well, if you don't cast him, then I won't do the movie. And they were like, if you don't do the movie, we're just going to tear up your contract.
Oh, fuck.
So they did that.
Oh, my God. Girl.
So then she made a lot of B movies for the next 2 years, like this one, before getting married and retiring from acting at age 22. And she passed away in 2012. She remained married to her husband that whole time, and her husband passed away 5 years later in 2017.
Was the husband that boyfriend?
No, the husband was like an English businessman or something. Someone who she could afford to retire from acting with, you know?
Yeah, that's fair.
Vaudeville comedian Elmer Brendel, better known as El Brendel, appears in this movie doing his classic good-natured idiot Swede shtick, which had been his bread and butter in vaudeville since 1913. And I will also note that the dog in this movie, named King, is played by Spike, the mastador who would then play the title role in 1957's Old Yeller next year.
Okay, so Old Yeller is in this movie.
Yep.
Oh my god. Oh my god, Ben, actually. I'm like freaking out now.
I don't think you've even seen Old Yeller.
I've seen Old Yeller.
Oh, okay, sorry. So the she creature, as I mentioned, was the bottom half of the double feature with It Conquered the World. That double feature was released July 25th, 1956. It got poor reviews, unlike It Conquered the World. And it was the subject of episode 8 of season 8 of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Paul Blaisdell's monster costume for this film is considered to be one of his best and was later reused in the film Voodoo Woman the next year.
Is that a sequel to Voodoo Man?
No.
Okay. From like the 40s?
Yeah, I know what movie you're talking about.
I just wanted to underline, like, if it was, this is
Right.
like 10 years later.
Yeah, no. Today you can find The She Creature on DVD paired with Day the World Ended on Volume 1 of the Samuel Arkoff Cult Classics collection. It is also currently streaming on Tubi.
Tubi to the rescue. Cool. Well, hopefully folks listening at home can find a copy and watch along. Tubi is free. You just have to deal with some ads, so check it out there. You're going to hear a brief musical interlude, and when we come back, we will discuss The She Creature from 1956, directed by Edward L Cahn.
See you on the other side, everybody. Welcome back to Scream Scene, everybody. We just finished watching The She Creature from 1956, directed by Edward L Cahn. Sarah, what did you think?
You know, it felt like it started off strong and just coasted and fell flat by the end.
Yeah, I don't know about fell flat, but I would agree with you that it starts strong and decreases in quality, definitely.
Yes. I think how steep that decrease occurs depends on your tolerance for movies like this.
For sure.
Yep.
But for my money, this wasn't that bad.
It just wasn't that good.
It was better than I was expecting.
That's fair.
And it sort of continued the trend of these AIP monster movies being a little better than expected and a little more interesting than expected. But I will say that, like, there's some major flaws with this one.
Like, I would agree that that's definitely a trend that AIP seems to have with their pictures, but this one didn't really have that interesting spark. At least that didn't seem to be the interest of the people making the movie. And we can kind of get into that in the discussion.
For sure. So let's talk about the story, which is sort of a Svengali, Bridie Murphy, Creature from the Black Lagoon mix.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if we were going to get like a Murders in the Rue Morgue kind of vibe.
Sure.
Because we have like stuff happening in a carnival. But let me get into it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I'm just going to list our main characters here.
Okay.
Just so it's kind of clear who everyone is. So we have Dr. Carlo Lombardi, and he's our big bad, the hypnotist. A Dr. Ted Erickson, who is our main protagonist. He is also on the more academic side of hypnotism. They say his actual study is like psychic arts or...
Yeah, I think like nowadays he would just be like a hypnotherapist, like he's a psychologist, like he's not. Dr. Lombardi, you see, is sort of he's a doctor in the way Dr. Phil is a doctor, and he's a hypnotist in the way that like
He's at carnivals and has a singular person who says, oh, my great ancestor, Brittany Murphy or whatever.
He's a hypnotist in the way that, like, Penn and Teller are wizards.
Okay, so that's Lombardi and Erickson. Then we have Lombardi's assistant, who gets put under hypnosis, Andrea Talbot. No relation to Lawrence Talbot, because her last name is spelt with 2 T's at the end.
I didn't even catch her last name watching the movie. So.
Oh, it was just in the cast list.
Gotcha.
And then we have Timothy Chappell, who is a businessman and has a daughter named Dorothy, who, when we first start out in the movie, she is trying to get with Ted. And then we have our police lieutenant, Ed James.
Lieutenant James. Lieutenant James.
Yep, according to that Swedish butler.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as we start out, we are on the beach, and we see that Dr. Lombardi is looking out into the ocean and sees something. It looks like something glowing from the ocean. And he follows these footsteps that are like monstrous creature footsteps up to a beach house. And he sees a grisly murder scene. And he seems to be like, yes, good. And as he leaves, Dr. Erickson and his date Dorothy see Lombardi leave the beach house. Now, they were going for a walk. Dorothy was hoping it was a romantic walk on the beach. They go up to the beach house and they're like, oh, okay, people are murdered. Let's get the police. Apparently, Dr. Lombardi has been making a big splash with the local, like, wives clubs.
Yeah, basically.
He is based at the local carnival and has this whole act, as we kind of just described. He puts Andrea under hypnosis, and she does, I'm Brittany Murphy. Her name's like Elizabeth Weatherby or whatever. Brittany Murphy's an actress.
Yes, a deceased actress, yes.
Yeah. I guess it still works if she's deceased.
Except that Brittany Murphy died, like, in this century.
Yeah, what?
Bridie Murphy is who you're trying to think of. But yes, Elizabeth Weatherby is the, like, version in this movie.
Yeah. Now, this has all of the local wives in a stir, and this is where Lombardi predicted the murder that was going to happen on the seaside. Because Dr. Erickson saw Lombardi leave, he tells the police this, and Erickson and Lieutenant James head to Lombardi's circus act to ask him some questions. And this is when we meet Andrea. Now, before the police and Erickson arrive, we see that Andrea, when she is not hypnotized, just absolutely hates Lombardi, just absolutely loathes him. And he's all like, no, you will love me. I'll hypnotize you into loving me. You are under my control. He also kisses her to awaken her, which makes it real gross when you realize that, no, she actually hates you and doesn't want to be touched by you. He's a real creep.
Yeah, the whole relationship between the two of them is definitely, like, fraught with consent issues in that she doesn't have any because she's his hypnotic slave.
Yeah, and it's like because she says, I want to get away, and he's like, no, you won't be able to leave. So it's clear that she has, like, no real free will.
But to be fair, Lombardi is the villain.
Yes, but it's good to maybe know this going in. It's just consent issues aren't nice to deal with.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that, like, you know, sometimes you go into movies from the 50s and the men who don't really care about consent are the heroes of the movie.
This is true.
So,
we have had that.
Yeah.
There is a local carny. He has a name. I didn't catch it.
Johnny
the carny.
Mm-hmm.
He tries to get involved to help Andrea because he can see, like, something weird is going on here. I used to see Andrea all the time, just out and about, and now she's constantly kept under hypnosis in a catatonic state. And so he confronts Lombardi about this, and Lombardi's like, you don't understand. You fool.
Nice throat you have there. Shame if anything were to slash it.
So Johnny the Carney is the next to be murdered. And this is when we actually get to see the she creature who rises from the sea. I'm sure that there's, like, a riff on She Sells Seashells by the Seashore in there, but I'm not going to make it.
She kills Nope, I got nothing.
She kills. With each murder being done, Lieutenant James is like, Lombardi, I know it's you. And Lombardi's like, prove it. And part of why the lieutenant's sights are on Lombardi is because after every murder, Lombardi's like, I predicted this. It's a she creature from the ocean. I have a psychic connection with her. And just like makes it really clear that he has a connection to her, but actually I have nothing to do with these murders.
Yeah, it's almost like it's kind of wild because Lombardi's whole shtick is that, I put Andrea under this hypnosis and she remembers her past lives. And like, yeah, there's the Elizabeth Weatherby one, but the idea is that like the she creature is like her ultimate past life because like the she creature is supposed to be like some sort of like
prehistoric being.
Yeah, like
from the beginning of time.
Right, like as if it's sort of taking that creature from the Black Lagoon position that like what if man evolved from fish? And that the intermediary step there wasn't several million years of evolution into other creatures, but just like a fish person. So that's the she creature. She's the creature from the Black Lagoon with wet blonde hair and boobs.
Like giant badongadongs.
Yeah, like they're like scaly boulder boobs because they're like a hemisphere of a sphere that's just been like strapped like glued to her chest.
Like they took two basketballs.
And they took one basketball and cut it in half.
Yeah, they paper machéed a whole basketball. Like they are huge. It's like, can I get some like realistic feminine anatomy in here?
Well, it's not just the size of them, quite frankly. It's the fact that like they're perfect half spheres. They don't have any like realistic weight to them. Like Paul Blaisdell hasn't seen boobs maybe outside of a bra. Anyways,
they don't have the point of like a 50s bra at least.
That's true. And they're also clearly not like working mammaries because they're just like big scaly half spheres. Anyways, the point is that she has boobs and
we're being very mature about this.
Very mature about it. And Lombardi's whole shtick is he's like, oh yes, I am the one who gives the she creature form and I am the one who like summons her. It's like, okay, so the only reason Lieutenant James can't arrest him is because like that's crazy.
All bonkers.
Yeah, because like he's outright saying like he's not saying I'm telling the she creature to commit the murders. He's saying like I predict there will be a murder committed by the monster that I create with my hypnosis.
Like, am I really responsible if I say, hey, there's going to be a dog attack here, and then I let loose my rabies-ridden dog?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yes, you are.
Yeah, like James should be able to arrest him on the basis of like, okay, well, if the she creature's doing the murders and you're the one who's making the she creature a corporeal monster, it's your fault. Except that, like, again...
corporeal monster.
That sounds crazy.
Yeah. But there's all this publicity. Back to the plot summary. In Timothy Chapel, Dorothy's dad, who's played by Tom Conway, so he has like the appropriate like, I'm a businessman.
I'm rich
and I make money.
And I don't have ethics.
And I don't have ethics. He smells a way to make a quick buck and strikes a business deal with Lombardi. Chapel doesn't believe in any of this, but he's like, everyone else does. So let's get a book deal, cross-country tours, and all of this
TV
jazz.
appearances, newspaper columns.
And boy, do they make money. They make up to $250,000 each.
Yes.
Over 1 million books sold at $4.75 a pop, which, Ben, you said was...
like about $45 today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As these book deals and everything is going on, Lombardi goes to Chapel and he's like, I shouldn't be staying at the circus while we're doing all this, so I'm going to stay at your house. Good. And Chapel's like,
Yeah, sure, until you get, on your feet and find a nice, cool, rich person house to live in, sure.
Also during the montage of book deals, tours, oh my, Lieutenant James continues to investigate the murders, and Erickson begins to investigate how Lombardi does his hypnosis. It's kind of started as like part of the publicity, testing scientifically how the hypnosis works and all of this.
Prove me wrong, Erickson.
Exactly. And at the same time, Erickson begins to fall for Andrea, and she does so as well for him, which means Dorothy is out in the cold, but don't worry, she gets back with her ex-fiance.
Who's a drunk.
But it's implied that he gives up drinking to get back with her.
Yeah,
It's nothing. It doesn't matter.
Nope.
So cool. We've made $250,000 each. Now, Chapel says to Lombardi, you can move out. Lombardi's like, I don't think so, and starts to stare him down. And Chapel's like, no, you're going to move out.
I don't believe in your shit.
And Lombardi's like, fine, fuck you, fuck everything. We're out of business together. And Chapel's like, no, like, we can still do business, dude. Like, just get your own place. Like, we can still do business. But it's too late. Chapel has a target on his back. But before he moves out, there's one last demonstration at the Chapel house. And during this last demonstration, it becomes clear how powerful the love between Andrea and Erickson is, because he is helping her resist Lombardi's hypnosis powers. And this is like, he was already like upset that they were getting closer. Now he's like, fuck all this. You're resisting my power? Listen, bitch, you belong to me, is kind of his attitude. So, as part of this demonstration, he gets the she creature to come out. Now, Lieutenant James has put two and two together that, Lombardi makes the thing corporeal and blah, blah, blah. So he's searching the beach just as the she creature comes out and whacks him. He's dead. But not before he can say some last words to Erickson about he makes the thing corporeal and then murders people.
Yeah, and it always heads back to the sea the way it came.
Yeah. We see the she creature heads to the house and kills Chapel. Erickson makes it back to the house and is about to get killed, but the she creature can't kill Erickson. Just hesitates and instead turns and kills Lombardi. Dun dun dun.
Nobody saw that coming.
Now, it's been made clear in the rules of hypnosis up to this point that a person under hypnosis can only be brought out by the same person who put them in. So at this point, if Lombardi dies, then Andrea is just like stuck in this catatonic state forever. But with his last dying breath and a stream of ketchup from his mouth,
probably chocolate syrup,
he reaches up and releases Andrea from hypnosis and his control. And he's like, you can live your life now. I want your beauty to live on.
It's okay if I don't own you because, I'm going to be dead. So what does it matter?
Yeah. The she creature leaves back into the ocean. And Andrea and Erickson get together at the end. But is it the end? Because it ends with a giant question mark.
So I have some problems with this movie, but I think that...
Oh, I forgot to mention, the dog doesn't die.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The dog does get hypnotized into attacking Erickson at one point, but
several times.
Right, but then Andrea hypnotizes it away somehow.
She uses her she creature voice.
Right, which is okay.
Yeah.
So the plot here is nonsense.
Yeah.
But it's fun enough for a story of this type. Like, we've seen elements of this movie in other movies before, the like, I'm going to get the monster to do my murders for me thing, the like, I'm a sham hypnotist thing, the like just there's a lot of elements here that we've seen before, but like, I think this movie's fun enough that you can kind of forgive the fact that it's just total
nonsense. I will take issue with your point just right there about I'm a sham hypnotist.
Yeah, he's not.
Because in order for the movie to work, he has to be real.
So this is one of the things that's interesting about this movie, because like the last time we really had a lot of hypnosis outside of just Bela Lugosi was back in like the late 30s, the 40s.
Where there was a lot of spiritualism and that kind of trend.
Yes, exactly.
And they even like bring it up here as like the old wives are talking about like, oh yeah, I used to be into spiritualism and now I'm really into this, like, I think they're talking about yoga.
Yeah.
With like a Hindu guy.
Yeah, they're into yoga, and then now they're into like this like age regression stuff. And, even Erickson, when talking about like Lombardi, says like he set hypnotism back 20 years, right? From like the contrast between the two of them is supposed to be, that
Lombardi is trying to like take advantage of people while Erickson is trying to do this as an academic study to help people.
Yeah, exactly. And Lombardi's a fucking, whether he can do the powers for real or not, he's still a con man.
Yeah.
Because he's not like out here to be like, yes, with my powers of hypnosis, I will help you like overcome your childhood trauma about whatever. He's out here to be like, so I'm going to get up on a stage in like a tux, and my beautiful assistant will then like do some freaky deaky stuff under hypnosis, and then you're going to pay me money. Like, whether the hypnosis is real or not, that's still a load of bullshit, right?
And like, sure, the murders later on are clearly like he has chosen specific people, but the first two murders and then a couple later on just seem to be random to kind of legitimize that he had this prediction that there were going to be murders.
So this gets into like one of my big problems with the movie, but like I did want to just put like a spotlight on the fact that like we are getting this hypnosis stuff here because the Bridie Murphy stuff brought hypnosis back into like
vogue.
Yeah, exactly. The difference between the way that hypnosis is portrayed here versus those earlier movies, I think, is significant, because in those earlier movies, it was almost always proved that the spiritualist, the hypnotist, the seance guy, whatever, was like a load of crap. Yeah. Right? That like there was machines set up in the room to pull off nonsense and so on and so forth. It was all a trick. And this movie has the same like tone as one of those, because our hypnotist is the bad guy, but his powers are real. And we also have like a good guy hypnotist, which I think shows like a difference in attitude about it coming into the 1950s, where psychology is starting to be a much more like legitimate practice, at least in like the eyes of the common person, basically. So we have this kind of like conflict between, I would say, like the old-fashioned hypnotist who's like, I am the great Lombardi.
Yeah.
And like the modern hypnotist who's like, hello, yes, I'm doing some studies on some lab rats over here because of like, I'm probably, I'm doing some, like the FDA wants me to approve like a psychiatric drug or some nonsense.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, something interesting about this movie, that kind of conflict being shown.
Conflict and progression.
Right. But one of my biggest problems with the movie, among others, is that Lombardi doesn't really have like a clear motive for what he's doing most of the time.
Besides being an egomaniac.
Right. So he's an egomaniac. Great. And he obviously like wants control over Andrea. I get that too. That's fine.
Well, it's not fine, but go on.
No, like as a character motivation. And like, Chapel comes to him and is like, hey, you're doing these predictions. Like, okay, so here's the thing. Lombardi already is making money off his shows, right? Because he's in a carnival, but he's making like 35 cents on like selling like pamphlets instead of like the $4.50 that he's selling, on the, or $4.75 that the book is selling or whatever, once he gets in business with Chapel. But Chapel's the one who realizes like, oh yeah, like keep doing predictions, like keep doing things that will get you publicity and then you'll make more money. Chapel's the one who makes Lombardi's motive like money.
Yeah.
Because like if Lombardi's motive was to get rich, he wouldn't have needed Chapel to come in and be like, hey, you could do book deals, right? The impression that you get at the start of the movie is that like, yeah, he's, selling tickets or whatever, but that's because like, that's just how he's like making a living on his like weird hypnotism powers. But, when the movie starts, he's already murdered just like a random couple that lives by the sea. And, then at one point in the movie, he murders some random teenagers necking in a car overlooking a cliff. Like the she creature just comes up and like flips their car off the cliff.
There's no explosion, but they are dead.
They're definitely dead. Like,
yeah.
Definitely. That's not like sending the creature after Johnny or sending the creature after Chapel or sending the creature after Erickson. Like those aren't targeted. The teenager one happens after he's in business with Chapel. So it can be a thing where he's like, I predict a murder. And then a murder happens. But like the first one, like, yeah, he predicted that too. But why though? Like put yourself in his shoes.
Yeah.
You have the power to make like a busty fish monster come up out of the ocean and do murders.
Dope. So do you know where Mitch McConnell lives?
So step 1, tell everyone that the monster is going to come up on shore and murder some people.
Yeah.
Step 2, get the monster to murder some people. Step 3, I don't know. Why is he doing that? And why those people? So like the only conclusion is like, yeah, he's an egomaniac. He wants everyone to be like, oh wow, you were right. Like it just seems like he just wants people to come up to him and give him a pat on the back and say like, wow, Doc, you were right.
Yeah.
And like that is a wild, like just affirmation is a wild motivation for I randomly murdered some people brutally. Like,
sure, but you did forget step 4, profit.
Except that, like, okay, what's the profit on that though? Profit is Chapel coming to him and being like, hey, we can make some money on this.
Chapel definitely capitalizes on it and turns it into this huge thing.
Yeah.
But I think that was still part of where Lombardi was going. But I will say that, like, absolutely the motivation is muddled.
Yes.
And that is even acknowledged by the characters, like Lieutenant James. At one point, Erickson is like, what would the motives of these murders be?
Yeah.
And Lieutenant James is like, love, hate, or profit. Or any one of those 3.
That's what I mean. Like, we can assume that maybe he was doing it for publicity and money to begin with. But, like, given that it was just publicity that was earning him 35-cent brochure sales, like... You know, it's unclear. The movie doesn't make it very clear other than he's like a psychopath.
Yeah.
Right? And then the other thing that's frustrating to me is that we meet Andrea already a slave of Lombardi. And she has all this dialogue that's like, I hate you, and like, I hate being here, and like, I wish I could escape from you. And he's like, you can never escape me. Like, you need me, and like all this stuff. But like, their backstory is never really...
explained
at all.
Johnny the Carney says something along the lines of Andrea being someone who also worked at the carnival and happened to start working with Lombardi, but that's really the only thing we know about her backstory.
Right. Like she was his, like, you know, fucking magician's assistant or whatever. But like, yeah, by the time we meet them, like, why did she start working with him? Why did she start agreeing to get hypnotized like this? Once he started doing it, why did she stick around this long? Like, how did things get to here? And so it makes like Andrea's character very weak because we don't get it. You know, it's like the old, like, why do you stay with him question with abusive relationships, only like this movie's answer is like, because he has her under hypnosis. And it's like, right, but like, how did we get that far?
Yeah, how did we get to this point? I think even just something along the lines of like, her saying to Erickson, you know, when we started, we had such big ideas of what we could do with the show, and then he blah, 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 blah.
Right. So this is the other big problem I have with the movie.
Yes,
which is
the montage.
Yeah, her entire relationship with Erickson, them falling in love, them growing to trust each other, him teaching her how to resist his mind powers, all of that happens in a dialogue-free montage that is like happening at the same time as we get like the classic like shots of trains going to different cities and him performing in different theaters, like, oh, he's a worldwide hit montage.
Yeah.
And like, here's the thing. Here are the scenes where her and Erickson interact before that montage. He meets her at the carnival. They leave Lombardi's act together. He's like, hey, you seem cool, because like Andrea's really hot. And it's very obvious that, like, that is what initially gets Dr. Erickson's attention. And so they leave the carnival act together, and he's like, hey, want to get a coffee? And she's like, oh, yeah, I would love to do that. And then, like, Lombardi from the other room is like, no, you don't. And she's like, no, I don't. And, like, walks away. The next time he ever sees her is when Lombardi does his first show at Chapel's house for like the investors, basically. And Erickson's there with Dorothy because theoretically they're a couple. And Andrea walks in and Erickson basically turns into like the wolf from those Tex Avery cartoons. And
with like the heart pounding out of his chest. And
Dorothy's
drool.
Like, hey, I'm right here. And he's like, yeah, but she's just so clinically interesting from my perspective, like as a psychologist. And then the next time they're together is in like random scenes in the montage where like he's talking to her at his lab, and then they're like talking to each other in a car on a date, and like we don't hear any of what they're saying to each other. So, like, we don't get to hear obvious things that you would obviously get in those scenes, like Erikson asking her, hey, how did you get mixed up in all this? And, like, how does this work? And, like, do you think this is real? And what's the deal with this, that, and the other thing? And, like, oh, yeah, you want to resist him? Well, I know some hypnosis, too. And, like, here's how you do it, and blah, blah, blah. It's as if, like, the writer, Lou Rusoff, was like, oh, I don't feel like writing that part because I don't really know how hypnosis works and I don't really have an explanation for why her character would make sense. So I'm just going to throw all that in a montage. And we find out that's what they've been talking about later when, like, Lombardi and Erikson are talking, and Lombardi's like, you sure have been getting close to Andrea. And Erikson's like, yeah, and I've taught her how to resist you too. And it's like, okay, I guess that's what was happening off screen, you know, and that's just a bad choice of what to gloss over in your story.
Yes. And I think, given that we get specific shots in, like, different locations, it makes me wonder, was dialogue written and the director was like, oh, we're running out of runtime, so let's just gloss over this, or something. It just makes me wonder, because the thing about this movie that makes it, to me, not as good as the other AIP pictures we've seen is because it seems to focus on the she creature as the big bad, rather than using premise of a she creature to open up the character drama like we saw in last week's movie, It Conquered the World, where it's like, oh, the Venusian isn't necessarily the big bad. It opens up the character drama for Lee Van Cleef.
And the thing is like, it's Lou Rusoff writing all of these movies, but it's not Roger Corman directing all of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here is, like, the character drama is here because I suspect the montage scene was shot as a montage scene. And the reason why I suspect that, and that it's not just like, oh, we cut some stuff down for time or whatever, is because there's this whole fucking drama about Erikson and Dorothy, and are they going to get together? And, oh, well, he's interested in Andrea. And then, like, she's got this drunk ex who's, like, been going through scenes for, like, the whole movie being like, hey, Erikson, like, you're here to be a fraud.
Adored?
Yeah, like, exactly. Like,
so weird.
He's just, like, there drinking in the background being like, oh, it's the stupid fraud Lombardi and it's stupid fraud Erikson here to hang out. You guys are going to be dumb frauds together? Like, that's
practically what he says.
Why don't you go kiss?
That would be a movie.
Right. And so it's like, this is this whole thing that's going on. And then it, like, culminates in Dorothy just being like, yeah, man, if you want to go be with Andrea, like, whatevs. And then, like, letting him go. And then the drunk ex approaching Dorothy and being like, hey, I'm an alcoholic. And her being like, yeah, that's a problem for me. And him being like, well, then I guess I won't be. And she being like, cool, we'll get back together.
His name is Bob, by the way.
And it's just like, why are these characters in the movie? The movie doesn't care about them. Like, Dorothy and Bob are treated as, like, appendices in this movie. They don't serve a plot purpose. Like, Dorothy's purpose in the story, because she just gets, like, dumped by Erikson, like, halfway through, her purpose is because, like, her being Chapel's daughter is why Erikson knows Chapel and is therefore, like, in the area for all of this. But, like, Erikson could have been, like, Chapel's son.
Yeah.
Because the whole reason why, like, Lombardi gets lumped in is because, like, Chapel's wife is into him, right? And then that could be super interesting with, like, Erikson being like, Mom, this guy's, like, a fraud, and her being like, no, I did see it. So it's just like these weird vestigial characters. And it feels to me like Rusoff putting in that kind of character, you know, drama that he likes to put in these movies. And then, like, director Edward Cahn coming in and being like, right, but, like, we're making a monster movie, right? Like, nobody cares about this, right? Cool. Yeah. So let's not. But it's like, if you were cutting the movie down because, oops, we shot a 2-hour movie and it needs to be an hour and 10 minutes. You would
cut those characters.
Yeah, you would cut those characters, not the fucking main plot developments of your movie.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, like, my main problem with this movie, because, like, the only real horror, like, the creature isn't that terrifying. You can, like, walk briskly away from it.
Yeah, that's a big problem.
It just kind of, like, slaps you and then you're dead. And that was such a disappointment, because when you see the first grisly murder scene, like, the bed is flipped over, the way that the
There's like blood on the walls.
the way that the corpses are around and have like this like look on their face. Like, it's really well done, and it really sets you up, and then it doesn't go anywhere. And the creature is such a letdown. The only real horror was in that controlling relationship between Lombardi and Andrea.
Right.
Like, that relationship is literally described as Andrea being subjugated and it being like a form of slavery, which, I mean, like, can't really compare it to actual slavery, but it's still, that's where the horror is going to be. How she hates him, and yet he, like, kisses her while she's asleep.
Right. I feel like, because I think you're totally right. And the problem is that the movie's not from Andrea's point of view, or even, like, doesn't have enough scenes with her in it. Like, she basically has 3 dialogue scenes in the movie, more or less. She's in a lot more of the movie, but, like, she has 3 scenes where she actually gets to, like, talk and express herself. And I feel like what might have happened is maybe a realization that Marla English can't act. Oh. Like, she's trying.
Yeah.
Like, she's trying her best here, and she's even, like, putting on an accent for being, like, Elizabeth Weatherby or whatever. But maybe there was a recognition, like, she couldn't get across that horror well enough to make that the focus of the movie.
Sure.
I don't know, but I totally agree with you. And I totally agree with you about, like, the letdown of the murder scenes after the first one. Because the first one is really grisly and cool. And, you know, like you said, the others are not.
The teens dying in the car, though, that's pretty dope.
Well, and also Johnny's, like, on a bed that gets, like, thrown across the room. But, like, the problems with the creature are kind of the same problems we had with, like, Universal monsters, like, 10 years before this, which is that they walk real slow. Because I guess...
Like, it's comical when Tom Conway's trying to get away, because he's just, like, walking slowly backwards, and not in, like, a, I am stunned, but in a, like, I guess, okay, back away, keep shooting.
He could easily just run away from it. You know, he shoots it a few times, he runs out of bullets, he throws his gun at it, and now his back's up against the wall, and it comes at him, and it bonks him over the head. And it's like, when you were outside, you could have just turned around and run. And that's the same with, like, everyone this creature comes at. And yeah, it's got these big claw arms. Like, it's not like it couldn't have done all the horrific stuff that it looks like it did in other scenes. It's just that when it comes time to film it, like, clearly they don't have any kind of, like, special effects mechanism for having it actually, like, tear people to bits.
Yeah.
So Paul Blaisdell just, like, knocks people on the shoulder with one of the big claw arms, and they just go down. It's a very old-fashioned kind of monster murder scene in a way that feels disappointing here in 1956.
Yes. Yeah, honestly, like, the creature design, not counting the boobs and the blonde-haired wig, it's kind of a neat design because it's, like, based on, like, a lobster.
Yeah, it's a cool creature, even with the, like, hair or whatever. Like,
that just makes it so, like, comical. Like, oh, how do we make sure that we know it's a girl?
Yeah, it has long hair and boobs.
Yeah,
like,
despite being a lobster who who lays eggs and doesn't, like, milk their babies.
Yeah. So, regardless of those things, even including those things, this is definitely the best creature suit that we've seen from Paul Blaisdell. Like, it's big, it's tall, it looks cool. The faces are really, like, cool and menacing design.
It moves a little bit, not like having, like, mandibles, but when we have close-ups on it, you can see that it moves as if it's breathing or something.
And it's, like, wet, you know, and it looks like it came out of the ocean. Like, the hair is wet, like, it has texture. Like, it's undoubtedly the best thing we've seen from him, and it looks scary, and it's big, and it's tall. Like, it's a good monster, and the effects of, like, because when it first comes out of the ocean, it comes out of it like it's a ghost, and then it, like, materializes, or, like, when Lombardi calls, like, Elizabeth's spirit to go do things or whatever, this, like, mist comes out of Andrea and starts flying around, and, like, that looks pretty good. Like, the effects here are good. There's some good filmmaking here in terms of, like, use of light and shadow. There's some cool angles. There's
attempted camera work.
Yeah, there's, like, a cool, gritty, grisly, film noir-y kind of style to, like, the first third of the movie or so. And like the filmmaking never really gets bad. So like, you know, you can tell that the director is experienced and knows what he's doing and like has enough time to kind of do some cool stuff.
I think the other big thing about this movie that, I don't know, it's kind of like a thing you can't really put your finger on, is that it feels male-gazy.
Yeah, in a very like, how do I say this? Casual, like non-thinking way.
Yeah, like they're not doing it purposefully. You know, the camera doesn't like look longingly over Andrea's legs, but there were plenty of times where like she's just in the background changing.
Yeah, it's when we say it's not purposeful, it's not that we don't think they did it on purpose. Like they did it on purpose.
Yeah.
But it's not like, it's the kind of like, okay, how am I trying to say this? Speaking personally, for my taste in movies, if you want there to be a sexy babe in your movie, and if you want the audience to be like aware that she's a sexy babe, and you want like her to have sexiness on screen, make that the point. Don't be telling me, you know, for example, oh, she's like a tough, rough badass and like she's a strong female character and like she's not like sexy, she's like violent and cool and whatever, but then be showing me like, hey, check out that ass though. Like, don't do that. Like, if you want to have sexiness in your movie, just be fucking honest about it and be like, yeah, like here's a scene where she's like undressing for like the lead protagonist because they're about to have sex and she's doing it sexy because like she's sexy. Yeah, exactly. Like be honest about it, right? And so what you have in this movie is like somebody going like, right, but like this is an exploitation picture. Like this is going to show in some drive-ins. It's going to show in some downtown theaters. Like we don't need to get code approval for this. So like she's a pretty dame and like this is her dressing room. So just have her like, you know, take her shirt off and we'll see her bra or whatever. Like
I really did not expect how much you would play to the microphone once we got these. It is quite enjoyable, and I hope the listener enjoys it as well. Yeah, it's weird how the movie, you would expect like very like purposeful male gaziness, I think would best be described as like sexy dame enters and the camera follows her foot up the leg, follows every angle around the hip and up to the breasts and her face.
Yeah.
And this movie doesn't do that, but it certainly does make sure that you see that Andrea has curves underneath a very see-through dress.
Yes, her dress is very like translucent. So when she like gets up on the couch on the stage, you can like see right through it and see her legs and everything. It just feels like it's like we're not drawing attention to it. It's just there. And I could see how someone might argue like, oh, well, then it's just like matter of fact. So it's not that bad. But as I'm saying, I actually think that's worse because it's you trying to just put in some gratuitous sexiness under the radar and it's not serving any like purpose, right? Like my belief about filmmaking is that everything you are doing should be an attempt to get some kind of reaction out of the audience, right? In horror, you're trying to scare them. In comedy, you're trying to make them laugh, right? You know, a dialogue heavy drama might be trying to get you to like think about like certain issues that you'd never thought about before or whatever, right? And so it's like, it always feels disingenuous to me when a movie is clearly trying to like make me feel horny, but like is trying to play it off like it's not.
Yeah.
Right?
You want things to be committed to.
Just honest about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't mind you trying to get me horny, but just like be honest about it.
Sure. And I think the fact that like we have our character who is in the midst of a relationship that needs to have discussions about consent.
Right.
She's the most sexualized. And then the creature that is summoned from her lineage is a lobster with tits and a wig.
Yeah.
Like, it's just really weird.
For the most part, like, this isn't like, okay, like, if you haven't watched the movie along with us, listener, like, it's not super egregious. Like, this isn't like something where you're going to watch it.
Worse.
It doesn't feel sleazy. Like, you're not going to feel icked out.
You're not going to have to worry about when your parents walk in.
Right. It's just the kind of thing where, like, I think the thing about it is, I I think it's showing that we're into the later part of the 50s, and like the codes hold on movie making is starting to really get challenged and slip. Like even major studios are putting out movies without code approval every now and again by this point.
Mm-hmm. Like when does Some Like It Hot come out?
Like 57, 58?
Yeah, so like, next year.
Yeah, so like, you know, morals are changing, times are changing. We're getting like a little more bold about what we can put in like movies. So that's one aspect of it. And I think the other aspect of it is just, you know, coming back to the point about how like Andrea and Ericsson's entire relationship happens like practically off screen. Basically, Ericsson realizes the first time he sees Lombardi's show that he's got Andrea in a way deeper hypnosis than she should be. And he even like turns to Dorothy and he's like, he's got her totally under his control. So the natural question, I feel like if I was watching a show and I saw like, say, a tarted up dame on stage, like in like a super revealing costume and being like made to like show off how sexy she is, but like it was clear to me watching the show that she was like drugged or like drunk or like not in her right mind. And meanwhile, there was like a totally in his right mind like guy up there being like, yeah, shake it, baby, for the audience or whatever. I would start to feel really weirded out. And I would like go up to, you know, if I was Ericsson in this movie, it's like, you know, my first question for Lombardi would be like, so is she like aware of what she's wearing? Is she aware? Like, is she a willing participant in this show? What's her cut of the profits?
Yeah.
You know, or the first time I talked to her, it would be like, hey, do you know that like this is what the deal is? And like there'd be questions. It's like, hey, why is she hey Lombardi, hi. If you're trying to prove to the scientific community that like your theories about how we come from fish people and we can like
access those memories.
Yeah, through like hypnosis. If you want that to be taken as legit and taken seriously, why the fuck are you up here in a fucking magician's outfit with your like fucking see-through white dress assistant like laid out in a fucking spotlight on the stage? Like, why is this your presentation? Like, oh, I'm sorry, the scientific community laughed at you? Yeah, that's because you need to submit papers, dude, for peer review. You don't fucking go up on fucking TNN and be like, hey, here's my sexy assistant.
Yeah.
There are plenty of murders in this movie.
Yeah. But they're all unnamed characters, so it feels like not enough people die.
Yeah, because we have too many characters.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you know what would have been a great thing to do with Dorothy and Bob after they got together and weren't involved in the story anymore? When the she creature comes up to the house to raise hell to go after Chapel, like have them get murdered or something.
Yeah. More people need to die.
It's a fun movie. I enjoyed watching it. I had a fun time. It's, you know, about as enjoyable as a movie of this type should be. The reason I brought up earlier about like the difference is that Roger Corman isn't directing it is, you know, this is still the same writer and this is still the same producers.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, if you're watching this and you're going like, well, but the other AIP movies, like they were like this, but they were a little more thoughtful than this. They were a little cleverer than this. They felt a little more aware of what they were doing than this. Like if everything else is the same but one element, I feel like that points the finger at that element for being responsible for that, right? So it's like, okay, what is Roger Corman bringing to these movies? Well, he's bringing the ability to shoot a feature-length film in 2 days for $4,000. But like he also, I think, is bringing like a sense of like...
authorship
and like intentionality to things.
So let's move on to ranking, because I think this is a good transition point. We brought up It Conquered the World earlier. That is currently ranked at number 47, but I would love to hear what your range is.
Okay, so you brought up It Conquered the World, and I see where you're going with that, given that it is the other half of this double feature. But where my brain went initially was The Amazing Mr. X, aka The Spiritualist, at number 60.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, just because we're in the same realm of like
hypnotism
used for evil
and spiritualism.
Yeah. So my honest opinion is that this feels about the same quality level as that to me. Like they both have some cool shots. I think maybe The Amazing Mr. X has some more cool shots. Amazing Mr. X maybe has some better characters and better character motivation, but also doesn't have like a monster that comes out of the sea and like rips people asunder.
Its production value is much higher.
Yeah, but I think this movie does a decent job of hiding its production values, mostly by like shooting on location. And, you know, again, this is like a good looking monster from Paul Blaisdell. Like, I would say the quality of this monster suit is about what I would expect from like a tokusatsu television show in Japan, like a Tsuburaya monster design, but not like
you expect the Power Rangers to come out.
Right. Like, it's not a Tsuburaya monster from like a movie, but it is like a Tsuburaya monster from like Ultraman or something. Yeah, entirely. So like production values here are fine. Above the Spiritualist, aka The Amazing Mr. X, is Jujin Yuki Otoko, aka Half Human, which again feels like in the ballpark of this movie in terms of like also the like horror to not horror level. I feel like this movie's trying to be horror much more than Jujin Yuki Otoko was, because Jujin Yuki Otoko has kind of like a bit of a very special episode energy to it as well, where it's like, well, if only we were nice to the monsters, right? Which is very Ishiro Honda. But like this, you know, you say that like the horror in this isn't, you know, there isn't that much of it. But like I think its intention is to be a horror movie the whole way through.
I said the focus was a little off.
Yeah, for sure. Just above Jujin Yuki Otoko is Cult of the Cobra, which also is like a movie that is cheap with like kind of a nonsense plot that doesn't really work, but is sort of about things, but you're unsure if the movie knows that it's about things.
Yeah.
So my ceiling for this one was The Black Room at number 57, which definitely knows what it's doing.
Sure.
So I think the highest I would go on this movie is 58. Looking down from The Amazing Mr. X, there's It Came from Outer Space at 61, which is basically, you know, It Conquered the World, but it's Universal doing it in 3D several years earlier.
And I think the creature design is much better.
Yeah, absolutely. But everything else kind of sucks. Honestly, I think this might be better than that, or it might be worse. Like, that movie gets some points in my books for being like the first movie to do some of its ideas about the alien coming and controlling people and blah, 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 blah. So this might be worse than it. It might be better. But below that is Revenge of the Creature, which is fine. But if I had to, I think I would watch this over Revenge of the Creature. There's more interesting stuff going on here. Revenge of the Creature is like
a little bit of a deeper dive. It goes a little bit further with the premise.
Yeah.
By like 2 steps.
But it's very paint by numbers.
Yeah,
like it's
very
like
paint by numbers and just almost like re-hitting the same steps.
Yeah, you can like time, you know, everything that's going to happen in that movie, right? It's like, okay, the creature's going to escape, and then they're going to go after him, and then it's going to threaten the people, and then it's going to kidnap the girl, and they're going to go after him, and then they're going to defeat him, and then he's going to sink into the water. And like, this movie is more, I think, creative, and just more fun to watch because there's more like bonkers stuff going on. So that's my range, 58 to 62.
Okay. So, my range is much lower.
Oh no, how much low?
So I started looking at one of our earliest 1950s B movies. Was thinking about how well the horror was handled in that versus this movie, which kind of missed where the real horror was.
Missed the opportunities, yeah.
Yeah. And I was drawn to The Neanderthal Man.
Oof.
At number 140.
Oof.
Now, The Neanderthal Man also has big issues with consent.
Yeah.
But that's barely acknowledged. with the idea of like the mad scientist experimenting on his deaf mute maid.
Yeah, his deaf mute Latina maid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like barely like it's like, oh, it's horrific that he did that, but like
it barely registers on the character's radar as being monstrous.
Yeah, it's more like, oh wow, he turned her into a monster rather than like, oh shit, that's fucked up. And then there's also the like sexual assault in that movie, which does register on the characters more, but kind of still feels a little fucked up in how the movie treats it because the movie can't come out and actually say it, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like as if that scene in the movie plays as if a bunch of people who didn't know what rape was found a person who had been raped. Like it's like something out of like Pleasantville where it's like reality sort of like interposing itself on this 50s movie. It's bad. Yeah. Also, the like effects in that movie are bad. The makeup's bad. The pacing's bad. The shooting's bad. Everything about the Neanderthal Man is fucking terrible.
Yeah. So that was my floor.
Okay. That's fair.
And then moving up, I stopped around 1:30. Bride of the Monster.
The Ed Wood picture.
Yeah. Because that movie, I guess the creature is better in She Creature because it's actually made and not just like
a wrestler that we found.
Or like an octopus from stock footage.
That we stole.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a hard time trying to find a ceiling. I just know it goes above the Neanderthal Man, to be honest.
Well, I will say compared to Bride of the Monster, that the one thing you really feel watching this movie is that if this movie had been made like 10 years earlier, Lombardi would have been played by Lugosi.
Yes,
like
they do the Bela Lugosi stare and focus in on his eyes.
This movie has the same understanding of hypnosis and how it works that the average Bela Lugosi movie does, right?
Yeah.
Like, hypnosis is done by locking eyes with you and making hand gestures.
Yeah, I feel like Lombardi would have been Lugosi, and the She Creature would have been Karloff as Frankenstein's monster.
Sure.
So where do we go from here, Ben?
Well, so if your ceiling was 130, that's 62 to 130, which is 70 movies, roughly. So the midpoint of that would be like somewhere in the 90s. So like 95 is Captive Wild Woman, which is also a movie about a lady monster. And
Soul of a Monster is above that too.
Soul of a Monster is the one where there's a lady Satan.
Yeah.
So Soul of the Monster is bad because it's all a dream.
Yeah.
Captive Wild Woman is bad because it doesn't know what the fuck kind of movie it is. Because it's like, well, what if half of this movie was stock footage from an earlier circus movie? And what if, like, the lady who's a monster... Like, in both of these movies, the lady monster is a woman who becomes some guy in a suit. Or, in the case of Captain Wild Woman, technically it's some guy in the suit who becomes a woman and then goes back at one point. Anyways, the point is, I much prefer the She Creature to Captive Wild Woman. Because while John Carradine is, like, better at doing what he does in that movie than Chester Morris is at doing what he does in this movie at least is like, yes, hello, we are a movie about a hypnotist turning a woman into her previous life form of a big lobster babe and killing people. Whereas Captive Wild Woman is like, hi, we're about a mad scientist turning a gorilla into a woman, and then she becomes a gorilla again in order to save this circus tamer from his act about lions and tigers. And you're like, wait, you've lost me.
What do you think about the She Creature compared to the original lady monster, Dracula's Daughter?
Where's that?
89.
That's tough. Dracula's Daughter is more interesting because Maria Zaleska is a character, not just like... I mean, you can't call Andrea a sexy lamp because you can't hypnotize a sexy lamp into becoming a lobster babe. But...
Have you tried?
No, dear, I'll get right on that. Below that is the mummy's tomb, which does feature the mummy threatening some kids making out in a car. But the mummy doesn't kill them. It just sort of is there and they get spooked and it walks away. So I think that makes this intrinsically better. But Dracula's Daughter, I think, has better character stuff. Gosh, which movie has the worst comic relief? Dracula's Daughter with its like, I'm a British bobby. Let's go down and take Dracula's coffin up to a lorry and then we'll drive the lorry round the bend and... Or this movie, which has like Olaf, the Swedish butler, being like, your Lieutenant James wants to talk to you, sir.
He was actually fairly minimal.
He was extremely minimal. So
I kind of prefer that.
Okay. Then which movie's inability to retain its focus where it should be is better? The She Creature, where it's like, oh, yeah. The horror is all these murders and the fact that she's under his control.
But also Lobster Babe.
Or Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is like Bela Lugosi is doing experiments on sex workers to see if they can breed with his ape. But these college students are going to go for a trip to the park.
I feel like Murders in the Rue Morgue wins this one.
Okay.
Because as much as like it's horrifying about the idea of Lombardi taking advantage of Andrea while she's under, she can possibly get out. Whereas like the horror in Murders in the Rue Morgue like leads to these women being killed.
All right. Do you want to do below Murders in the Rue Morgue and above Dracula's Daughter?
Yeah, let's do that.
That feels right to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So then entering the list at the new number 89 is The She Creature from 1956, directed by Edward L Cahn.
If you would like to see this list, you can go to our website, screamscenepodcast.tumblr.com. There you can find many of the other episodes that we've mentioned today, as well as our appeals box. If you would like to contest this or any other ranking, you can drop us a line through our Ask box on Tumblr. You can reach out over email at screamscenepodcast@gmail.com or over Twitter @_screamscene.
Scream Scene updates every Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spotify. You can subscribe to the show through our RSS feed and never miss an episode, and always have access on the podcasting app of your choice. If you would like to help the show out, you can do so by leaving a rating or a review on that app. By doing so, it lets the algorithms that control our destinies know that the show should be seen by other people. Or you can circumvent the algorithms, revolt against the machine by telling someone directly about the show, whether that's on social media or from 6 feet away while you're wearing a mask. You can just say, hey, this is a really cool podcast and you should check it out if you're into old movies, horror movies, culture, history.
Hypnotism.
Right.
Lobster babes.
Right. Finally, if you really would like to show your appreciation for what we do here at Castle Scream Scene, you can head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/Scream Scene Podcast, where you can become a patron of the night for as little as $1 a month. Patrons at higher tiers get access to regular bonus material, such as cut content from past episodes, movie reviews, short stories, music, audiobooks, bonus episodes that are a little off format, and more. So that's patreon.com/Scream Scene Podcast if you would like to chip in to help us keep the lights on and, continue to feed ourselves.
So what are we watching next week, Ben?
Next week, Sarah, we are watching the original Evil Child movie. It's The Bad Seed from 1956.
Oh, is this like a big deal movie?
Yes. This is a Criterion Channel movie.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
All right. Well, stay tuned, creatures of the night.
Bye.
Bye.